One of the specific issues that I want to address this morning is the issue that with regard to day 2, God doesn't say that it was good. And so we'll spend some time looking at all of Genesis 1. But one of the things that is noticeable is God does not say with regard to day 2 that it is good. And so we want to understand why that is. So let me just start by doing this. I'm going to read all of Genesis 1 because I just want you to sort of see with your own eyes what's going on. So let's start Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and morning were the first day. So in verse 5, we come to the end of the first day, obviously. Verse 4, we see, and God saw the light, that it was good. So we have a God creating something and declaring it to be good on the first day. Verse 6, so now we're at the second day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. So in verses 6 to 8, we see all of the second day in terms of God's activity on that day, but it's noticeable that God doesn't say that it was good, right? Nowhere in verses 6, 7, or 8 does it say that. Verse 9, and God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear," and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. Verse 11, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth," and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good, and the evening and morning were the third day. So when we went from verse 9 to 13, that was all the third day. Interestingly, there are twice that God said it was good. In verse 10, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. So he says that with regard to the dry land called earth. And then in verse 12, with the plant life he creates, and the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. So day 3 has 2 it was goods, day 2 has none. Look with me at verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth," and it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and morning were the fourth day. So there's an "it was good" that relates to the fourth day. Verse 20, and God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly, after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind, and God saw that it was good." Verse 22, and God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So you can see in verse 21 that there's an it was good that relates to the fifth day. Verse 24. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 26. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. Verse 29. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good, and the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So we saw there with regard to the sixth day, in verse 25, it says that it was good, and then in verse 31, and behold, it was very good. So the sixth day has two pronouncements of things being good. So let me just summarize briefly what we just saw when we looked at this. Each day of creation, day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, each day has God seeing it and saying it was good, except we don't see that on day 2. Now, the other pattern that's interesting is there are 2 days that have 2 it was goods. One of them is day 3, the other is day 6. So the question we want to consider at the moment is this: why is it that day 2 doesn't have it was good? Now, some will say the reason why is that day 2 was not good. And their reasoning goes along the following lines. Get with me Job 15, verse 15. Job chapter 15 and verse 15. Behold, he putteth no trust in his saints. Yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. In Job 15:15, it says the heavens are not clean in his sight. Why is it that the heavens are not clean in his sight at the time of Job 15? Well, by the time of Job 15, there's been a rebellion in the heavens, and the heavens are not clean in his sight because sin has entered into the heavens, and the heavens are not clean. Now, some will say that between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, those that advocate for the gap, that's where the satanic rebellion in the heavens occurred, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. So when that rebellion occurred, they would then say, are the heavens clean in his sight at that time? And they are not. So they would take the gap that they perceive between verse 1 and verse 2. They'll take Job 15:15 and say, the heavens are not clean in his sight, and therefore the reason why in Genesis 1 with regard to day 2, the reason it doesn't say it was good is it wasn't good. It wasn't good because there had already been a satanic rebellion in the heavens based upon the gap they see between verse 1 and verse 2. Are the heavens clean? And they would point to Job 15:15 as further evidence that the heavens are not clean. Now, happen to believe that. The reason I don't believe that, I'll give you a couple, but go to Genesis 1 with me and look at verse 31. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. And God saw, notice this, everything that he had made. So when it said that God saw everything that he had made, guess which things are included in that? Everything that he had made. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. So, does it make sense to take the position that what God created on day 2 was not good if later on day 6, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good? I can't take the position that what happened on day 2 was not good, because day 6, God behold everything that he had made and said it was very good. Look with me at Genesis 1, verse 7, just for a moment. Genesis 1, 7. And God made the firmament. So who is it that made the firmament? It's God. Verse 31 says, and God saw everything that he had made, which must include the firmament because God made it, and behold, it was very good. So the explanation that the reason day 2 doesn't have it was good was because it wasn't good, because there was already a rebellion and the heavens were unclean. I can't buy that. It doesn't make sense to me, because Genesis 1:31, at the end of the chapter, God looks at everything that he had made and says it was very good. So I can't accept the explanation that the heavens were corrupt at that time. It doesn't make sense. But then that leaves the question, well, okay, if that's not it, then what's going on? Why doesn't God say that day 2 was good? We're going to look at the Webster's 1828 dictionary, and we'll look specifically at the definition of good. And we're just letting this cycle to build suspense and build anticipation. And so here we go. We'll try this again here. Duplicate. And here we go. We're just letting the suspense build. And there we are. Okay. So this is the Webster's 1828. This is the word good. Let me first just show you how many meanings there are of this word. So there's 40 meanings of the adjective form. So that the top is just the adjective form. And then you can see good advice, good heed. And then as you go down, you will see the noun form. So my point is the word good used in multiple different ways? And it is the answer. Now, here's why that's relevant. A lot of times when we come to a word, we have the most familiar usage of it in our mind, and so we immediately think, oh, I know what this word means. It's talking about this particular meaning. But I want to just show you a couple things. So let's go back up to the top just for a minute, and we'll start with meanings 4 and 5. So meaning 4 of good is having moral qualities best adapted to its design and use, or the qualities which God's law requires: virtuous, pious, religious, applied to persons and opposed to bad, vicious, wicked, evil. That's meaning 4. Meaning 5, conformable to the moral law, virtuous, applied to actions. And one of the things I do like about the 1828 is it very often gives you scriptural references of how the words are used in a particular sense. What I want you to notice with regard to meanings 4 and 5, they both have a moral component to them. So, sense 4, having moral qualities best adapted to its design and use. Verse 5, conformable to the moral law. Often we think of good as having a moral component to it. But there's 38 other meanings of the word. Are there some meanings of the word good that do not have a moral aspect to it? And the answer is yes. Just to state the most obvious, have you ever had a meal and then said, that was good? Well, it's not a moral thing, it's a judgment as to quality, right? So let's go up to meanings 1 and 2 for a minute. The first one, valid, legally firm, not weak or defective, having strength adequate to its support as a good title, a good deed, a good claim. Meaning number 2, valid, sound, not weak, false, or fallacious, as a good argument. So senses 4 and 5 obviously had a moral component to it. Senses 1 and 2 don't necessarily have a moral component. It's talking about whether something is valid or not. So you can see that there are some meanings of the word good where it doesn't have a moral connotation, but it just has a reference to its validity. Now look with me at the third meaning, and this one is particularly significant. So sense number 3 is complete or sufficiently perfect in its kind, having the physical qualities best adapted to its design and use, opposed to bad, imperfect, corrupted, impaired. We say good timber, good cloth, a good soil, a good color. Now notice the example that it then gives. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And they're quoting Genesis 1:4. Now, by the way, just so you know, Genesis 1:4, and God saw the light that it was good. So in the dictionary definition there, they didn't quote that properly. You see that? And God saw everything that it made, and behold, it was very good. So with all things, it's always wise to validate, prove all things. But what I want you to notice with regard to the sense number 3 is that good can mean complete or sufficiently perfect in its kind. The idea is it's work that is complete rather than incomplete. Now, so back to Genesis 1 with me just for a minute. When God looked at his work and saw that it was good, this is my view, you can decide for yourself. God wasn't evaluating his work to determine if he had created something that was evil. God knew well and good that he didn't create something that was evil. When God looked at his work, he was determining whether it was complete. He didn't create anything that was evil or corrupt or wicked, because God doesn't do that. What he's doing is he's looking at his work and determining if it was complete. Okay? Now, how do I know that? Look with me at Genesis 1:31. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. Now think about this with me. If in Genesis 1, good is used in a moral sense, can God create something that is morally good, and another thing that is morally good, and another thing that is morally good, and the end result be very good? It can't be. It could only be good. However, if good is used in the sense of completeness, can God make one component that is complete, another component that is complete, and so on, and then make all the components and then say that that sum is very good in that it is more complete than the individual components? That's what's going on. And then make all. Now, another reason you know that, so Genesis 1:31, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Read the very next verse. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. What's the reason that God uses very good as opposed to good on the sixth day? Well, he used very good because it marked the point at which all of his work was finished. It was very good because it was very complete, right? Look at Genesis 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, everything that God intended to establish. So what this tells us is that in Genesis 1, Scripture uses the word good in the sense of complete. So with that then, so why doesn't God say that the work on day 2 is good? Look with me at Genesis 1 and verse 6. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day." So again, day 2 doesn't have an "it was good," but look at what day 2 does. So before day 2, what happens is the earth is covered in water. And so what God does is he creates the firmament, and he separates the waters that were above the heaven from the waters that were beneath the heaven. And so that on day 2, the firmament is created. But even at the end of the day 2, what is the condition of the earth? Well, the condition of the earth is still covered by water, right? Because there's still waters above it. And notice Genesis 1, verse 9. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. So what I'll suggest to you, again, I don't think good is being used there in a moral sense because God didn't create anything that was wicked. But what's going on, it seems, is this. When God created the firmament on day 2, it is a partial step toward making dry land appear, because God separates the waters that are above the firmament from the waters that are under the firmament. But that step by itself was not sufficient, was not complete to make dry land appear. So day 2 ends without God saying it was good. Then on day 3, what God does is he causes the dry land to appear by making the waters on the earth be in one specific location. And after God causes the dry land to appear, what does he say? He says, "It was good," because the work of making the dry land appear was complete at that time. So I think that's what's going on there. In other words, the traditional, or one of the common approaches to evaluating Genesis 1 is to say that when God uses the word good, he's using it in a moral sense. I would just encourage you to think about that. Good can have a moral sense, and sometimes it does, but good can also have a sense where it's not a moral sense, it's simply whether or not something was complete. Well, as you think about God creating the heavens, the earth, and everything in them, did God need to inspect his work to figure out if he had created something wicked? I don't think so. He periodically reviewed his work to see whether it was complete. When he saw that it was complete, he declared that it was good, that it was complete, and then he moved on to the next thing that he was going to accomplish. The verse that in my mind cements this interpretation is, if you say that things earlier in Genesis 1 are not good, in other words, that they are wicked, that they are evil, then how do you explain at the end of Genesis 1 when God behold all that he had made, in other words, everything that he had made, and said it was very good? God can't be lying and declaring something to be very good, very moral, if it is in fact wicked, if in fact there's already been a satanic rebellion. Let me just flesh this out just a little further. The idea of the gap theory in Genesis 1, between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 is this. God creates the angels as part of Genesis 1:1, and then Satan leads a rebellion. As a result of that, a bunch of angels follow him. As a result of that, God produces judgment on the earth in verse 2, and that's why the earth was without form and void. Meaning, if that's true, that by the time you get to verse 2, there's already been Satan's fall, a angelic rebellion in the heavenlies, and God's judgment upon that. And then you get to the end of verse 31, and God, behold, all that he had made, and it was very good. How can that be? How can that be that there's been a satanic fall, rebellion, judgment, and God looks at that and says that it's very good? It can't be, is the short answer. So go with me to Genesis 1, verse 8. So as to the reason why there's no it was good on day 2, it's simply because the work that God purposed to do was not yet complete, and he was going to finish what he intended to do with regard to making dry land appear. He was going to do that on day 3. So let's look at Genesis 1, verse 8. And God called the firmament heaven. Now, if you notice there, heaven is capitalized. One of the things you're going to see throughout Genesis 1 is that there will be nouns like that capitalized. And the reason why is those are nouns of direct address. In other words, if you see verse 7, and God made the firmament, so he made this expanse. A firmament is an expanse. It's a big, empty space. We would use the word space for what firmament is today. So he made the firmament, and it's a lowercase f firmament in verse 7. When you look at verse 8, and God called the firmament. Well, when God called the firmament something specific, he's giving a name to it, right? It's the same thing as if you say, if you use the sentence, my mother went to the store, mother would be lowercase, right? But if I have a quote where I say, Mom, can you help me? Mom in that case is capitalized because it's a noun of direct address. In Genesis 1:8, the reason why heaven is capitalized here, I believe, is that, and God called the firmament heaven. It's a direct address. It's the name that God is giving to the firmament that he created. Now let me show you one more thing with regard to day 2. If you look at Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So there's a statement in Genesis 1:1 about God creating the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1:8, though, says, and God called the firmament heaven. And so how do we sort of reconcile or understand that the heaven is created in Genesis 1:1, and then the firmament is called heaven in Genesis 1:6 through 8? So one thing to notice is this. If you look at Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The heaven there is singular. One thing you might notice in some of the modern versions is they will change the heavens singular to heavens plural in Genesis 1:1. But what's going on with regard to day 2 is this. In Genesis 1:1, when God creates the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So in other words, if this is the earth, so the earth exists here, and the earth is under this deep body of water, and then there is a heaven above it. So there's a heaven here, there's a big body of water, and then the earth is completely submerged within that body of water. Genesis 1:1 is simply the creation of that heaven at the top. What happens on day 2 is God creates an additional heaven. So Genesis 1:1, God created the heaven, and then the earth is here, and there's a body of water here, and the earth is within it. What God does on day 2 is this heaven up here still exists, but with this body of water right here, God puts a divider in the middle of it. So what happens is God decides to separate this deep, and there's a body of water that is above the heaven and a body of water that is below the heaven, because God creates this firmament. So that's what's going on day 2 with regard to the creation of an additional heaven that did not exist prior to God creating it on day 2. Genesis 1:1 was just that heaven top layer, if you will. All right. We're going to go ahead and pause there because there's some other things I want to take up next time. But that's the way to think about why on day 2, God doesn't use the phrase that it was good. It's not a moral judgment. That God uses that phrase to review his work and declare it to be complete. Let's close in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this time that we can meet together. We thank you for the truth of your word, and we just pray, Lord, that we would study it, that we would set aside our own opinions, and we would go by what you have recorded for us. We pray these things in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.